I want you to imagine we are hovering quietly above the world, watching how human beings have eaten, survived, and remembered for thousands of years. At the start, food was simple. You ate to live. You shared so others could live. Around that sharing, stories were born. As time went on, food carried more weight. It built kingdoms and fed revolutions. It taught us celebration and restraint. In our part of the world, we learned both early. We honor food, yet we also know how to go without it. We feast on festivals, we fast on holy days. Access and austerity sit on the same plate. Today we live surrounded by choice. Food is everywhere. Screens are everywhere. We eat while being entertained and slowly forget to listen to hunger. But food has not forgotten us. It still works the same way it always did. It becomes memory. It becomes belonging. Which is why every true story about food must begin at home, in a household, with a mother or a father, someone who cooks not to impress, but to express love, to show care. So let's begin right at the beginning with my guest today. A Sindhi household, his home in first Shivaji Park, then Bandra, a mother who was herself an amazing cook. Sindhi curry on the stove, always enough for everyone, cooked with heart, served with love. And from there we will circumnavigate the world like he did, 7 times over. Welcome to the Pooja Bhatt Show, Vicky Ratnani. It's a pleasure to be sitting across the table from you, my friend.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm already in love with the introduction. I said, wow, looks like I've done something good in life.
Well, you've done amazing things in life. So let me take you back to your first sense of taste and the aromas from your mother's kitchen. She fed us all with so much love.
While I was on the ship, because that's when you guys used to come a lot to the house with Dabu.
I used to shoot with Dabu and then after that gorge on Sindhi food.
Correct.
So what's your first food memory?
I can't say it's mother's milk. Okay? I have a lot of food memories, but there's one which I still remember. Me, Dabu and Jaya, how patiently we used to wait on a Sunday when that lid of the patila, when the flour on the side, atta cracks, that means dum tayar ho gaya. And then we used to literally point. I said, look, mom, wo atta, now we can eat, now we can eat. And we were in our thali is like 3 hungry children. Actually, I was the greedy one, waiting for that whiff of that biryani. And mom wasn't even a non-vegetarian.
And she used to cook it beautifully.
And she used to cook non-vegetarian because dad was non-veg.
Yeah.
We came from a carnivore background. So it's mom's biryani. And also another one is the simple omelette and pav. Pav or sometimes Wibs bread with that omelette with those 3 dots of green chilies there. And yeah, that's what I remember.
So the smells and the tastes of Shivaji Park must have been different from then Bandra, which you moved to.
Yes, because in Shivaji Park, we were a joint family. There were 5 brothers, 2 sisters, then the chacha-chachis. So it was a main kitchen of a hotel. So there were 3 chachas with their wives. So each one had their little micro family in that joint family. So there was a lot of help in the kitchen. The food was cooked throughout the day. And it was primarily Sindhi. I was the first kid in the family. I still remember they used to call me the crown prince. But anyway, it came with a lot of pampering. So yeah, food was a big thing in the family.
And you inherited that.
I inherited eating and I just loved eating. I was a greedy bastard. I wanted to eat. They come as flashbacks, different food memories. It was a subconscious build-up of love which turned into a profession.
That's what I want to ask you. At what point did you decide that I'm going to make a career out of food?
So, in fact, it's a lot to do with our common friend Ali. and his mum and Tanya actually. Dad was a very successful businessman, but like me and my brother, it wasn't our cup of tea. It gave us whatever we are, but it just didn't cut the crust for me. I was trying to discover, find out what I wanted to do, and at that point I didn't know myself, so I couldn't tell my parents anything. And while all this was happening in school, we used to visit hotels every week. Ali's mom used to work at the Holiday Inn and then at another hotel in Marway later. So I loved the feeling of being in a hotel because the food was good. You could eat as much as you want. It was fun. And I think it was the energy around looking after people.
Right.
That said that I want to try and pursue something in this industry. But still at that time, being a chef was nowhere on the plane. And I think I got counseled into this. They explained to me what the industry is. And it was just the beginning of the boom of the hotel industry in India. I worked a couple of years in a hotel in Mumbai. I trained at the Leela. I did my internship. I did some stints at the Oberoi. Then an opportunity came by to go and work on the ship. It was a very, very tough decision, leaving a hotel and then just going over to the ships. So I had no clue what it's going to be working on cruise ships. The first 1 month I thought I made a really wrong choice.
It was tough. It must have been.
I was like almost bullied. The kind of jobs which I was given and the sections where I had to work.
Right.
It was always the hard one. There was always more work. There was always less time given. Even it was spoken in a different way. That's what I didn't like.
Were you the only Indian on that ship?
Very few Indians. And I think 70% of the people were from the Caribbean.
Okay.
Jamaicans, Bajan from Barbados, and all big guys. Not really very friendly until you get to know them. What happened later was great. I was one of the boys of the yard. But it took me a while. It was really tough because, you have to have some level of skill and experience to already go on to the third gear while you're working.
Right.
Now here I was hardly in the hotel for a year or so. And the actual requisite to get a job on the ship is 5 years. But because of how I did my interview and my written test, that they said, you know what, this guy is brilliant. So they actually bent their rules.
For you.
I guess so. And that's how I was on the ship. So if I would have gone 3-4 years later on the ship, I would have been a little more equipped and more experienced and a little more skilled to do that work. Here I've gone there like a kacha limbu, and it was tough. 7 days a week, long hours. I used to work as the breakfast cook when I started my career. Work started at 3:30 a.m. Prepping, and then you are through breakfast. Then you finish by 10. Then you come back at 4 in the evening. You do your prep for the next day, serve for dinner, then again go back. After a while, you get so used to that 5 hours of sleep.
Right.
And 7 days a week and 11 months of the year.
Yeah.
To be on a ship, you have to be bulletproof. Or you have to hate the world or love yourself too much.
But you made your way up the ranks really quickly.
The first promotion I got was when I came to the QE2 from staff officers mess cook to third cook.
Okay.
That only happened because my leave was refused for my sister's wedding. I had a choice that, you know what, Arya Par, you want to work now, you can work, take the promotion. But if you go, God knows when you're going to come back. I spoke to my sister, I spoke to my mom. My mom was the one who understood everything.
Right.
That was my first promotion, which made me feel so good.
Look at the personal sacrifice in that sense. But that's another thing that strikes me is while the world celebrates, we've just come out of Christmas and New Year's and you're bang in the middle of wedding season, the hospitality business, the service industry is working round the clock. And that often comes at great cost to personal relationships, health. My heart goes out to people in the business. I'm like, we don't pause to thank people who are serving us, who are cooking for us, to make our holidays great enough. And this is a great example of that you
Yeah.
sacrifice your sister's wedding to be able to get that raise, really, in that sense,
Yeah,
to get promoted.
and be on the job.
Yeah, and that also says so much about you as a human being. You're amazingly driven. Where does that come from?
I'm lucky that I made the right pick of something which I completely love doing.
Yeah,
I think that was the whole driving force. It was not just a job for me
right.
because I was in search of knowledge. I was in search of experience. I wanted to see and experience what I had actually read in books. I graduated in the year 92 from catering college. And in those days, theoretically, we knew everything as students about champagne, about alcohol, about how this is made, about wines, what sauce goes with roast turkey, what sauce goes with roast lamb.
Correct.
But we had never seen what a turkey looks like. We never knew what champagne would taste like.
Right.
We didn't know anything about wines. We didn't know what a Dover Sole was. We didn't
Right.
know what Sol Munier was. But theoretically, I knew everything. I was quite embarrassed to tell my chef that, you know what, I've studied everything about lobster thermidor,
But I've never eaten it.
but I've never seen it in real. Forget eating it. And here I am glazing it with hollandaise and putting it in the oven. So yay, like I've fucking arrived, you know.
Wow.
Now, luckily at that point, I wasn't supporting a family. My parents were decent, that they used to look after me than me looking after them. So my goal was whatever I've read, whatever I've seen in books, I want to experience it now.
Right.
I worked as side jobs. I used to blow balloons for the restaurant. On disembarkation day, go and clean the cabins.
Okay.
I used to work in the stores where we are loading the things on conveyors so that I could afford to try out other things because I had like a $375 salary, you know, at that time. And I used to spend about $500 every month.
And most of it was on food, the rest of it.
Everything was on food. And it was on books. It was on anything to do with the kitchen.
Right. That's fascinating.
Over the years, I worked on 3 different companies. I started off there, then I moved to the other company where I was based in Italy. That's how I learned how to speak Italian. And then I came to Cunard,
Right.
where my third journey started. And that was a solid 12 years of growth in that one company. Where I was on the QE2, where we used to do the world cruise. Then I moved over to the Queen Mary, which was the largest ship in the world, where I became a chef de cuisine in the largest restaurant at sea. Then I became executive chef. So all in all, from a third cook in about 15 years to executive chef is like amazing,
Yeah.
especially for an Indian. In those days, there was still looked down upon Indian food
Yeah.
and Indian people, and you know,
Right.
there was definitely racism.
I mean, people's idea of Indian food was just a curry, basically.
And a lot of people who are not really well educated thought
The staple.
Indian food is curry.
Right.
When I used to explain, no, curry means it's like a sauce. So I had to explain to them. For them, what was it? It was a hangover meal. It was something after you go to the pub, spend $5 or £5, and it was a meal packed in tin foil and paper and eaten when you're not in your senses.
Yeah. So it mops up all the alcohol at your system.
Yeah. So the whole perception of India and Indian food was very, very different. Now it's really aspirational. Now every chef wants to cook Indian food.
True. But on the Queen Mary and the QE2, you had celebrated guests. You cooked for the great Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
A man who was in prison for 27 years, who was served boiled maize and soup for those 27 years, and then was the head of a nation, and then had banquets laid out for him and celebrated chefs cooking for him. What struck you about that encounter, and what do you remember about his taste?
Everything was under a scanner. We were given a requirement. There is someone who's of national importance. We didn't know who it was.
They didn't tell you.
Who's coming there and we saw all these 40-50 commandos on the ship because they came to do a whole security recce. And I was just a normal cook. I wasn't even a supervisor. I was like very junior. So the kind of requirement, not European, was the first one. Spicy, Asian, lots of vegetables, lots of meat. So my executive chef, he chose my sous chef from Thailand. Then there was another Malaysian chef who was doing Malaysian and Chinese kind of food. And then I was doing the Indian part of it. So it became like a multi-cuisine restaurant, literally. So it was basically a little spicy, not too bland, like how the native South Africans actually like to eat. Nobody had seen him, none of the crew. What food was going was tasted first before it goes out. And the food used to go to a point.
Okay.
After that, his team took over.
So they would serve him.
He was obviously on the top in one of the suites. So we had like 8 cabins which were like prime around the bridge of the ship and all that. But nobody knew. And also the ship had been chartered. So people who were supporting the charity had to come on a 3-day cruise.
Okay.
Where they drank, ate, donated, got his book signed. It was a 3-day gig. So there were like 8 or 9 cabins where he and I think his girlfriend at that time, though I don't know. So they were staying there. Day 1, day 2, day 3. Nobody complains. That means they like the food.
Absolutely.
So we took it as a compliment. Now on the last day, my boss, that's the executive chef, and his boss, which is the hotel manager, got a call from the captain that would you please come up on the bridge and bring the 2 chefs who cooked for Sir Mandela. And my chef freaked out. He said, man, what happened? Didn't we get any complaints? Did you all know? I said, no, nothing came. We were surprised. Because he's called us and he seemed like very kind of stern or urgent or, he also must be panicking. So we went up to the bridge where the captain is. 2 minutes later, suddenly the doors open and these 4 commandos come in.
Gun-toting commandos.
So we all standing there. Then suddenly he walks in. Wow! I didn't know what to say. I was just like so dumbstruck. And he said that I had to see the fine gentleman who actually cooked the best food I've ever eaten.
Lovely.
And he's saying we ate and we ate. So we never sent our plates back empty. I said, of course, we couldn't see your plates. So it was an amazing experience. The gratification you get.
Yes.
And that's the main thing about this job.
That's what you work for.
You get cut, you get injured. It's like the medals of an army officer. What are these? Oh, that's a medal. Let's see. Oh, that's a bono. That's my tattoo. There's a lot of brotherhood in this whole profession, especially within teams, who are working. The camaraderie, the bonding, the emotional connect which you get. Because we are all emotionally connected to food.
Absolutely.
So there's another level of understanding. We call it a chef thing.
Yeah.
That's why wherever I go, I get my way around, because when there's a chef, the chefs know how to deal with chefs.
And you also cooked for Lenny Kravitz.
That time I was chef de cuisine, and this was on the QE2. So basically they were going over for Tom Cruise's wedding.
Okay.
It was happening in Italy. So they did the transatlantic. So Lenny Kravitz, his partner, his 2 managers and 4 hotties, they all were on the ship. And he was the coolest guy. I mean, he loved his meat. He spoke about India. And I was sous chef at that time.
Right.
He said, listen, I love your menu. We'll eat off the menu. I did a little biryani for him on the ship as well. Yes.
Okay.
Everybody used to love Indian food. And there were only a handful of us on the ship. And even among the Indian guys, I mean, I never worked in an Indian kitchen, but I had a few dishes which I could sweep people off.
So watching the atta on your mother's biryani, I think, came to use there.
No. So actually once what happened, a Sindhi family came on board. You know who?
Who?
Kishore Bajaj.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And Sanju had told him that this guy's on board.
Right.
If you go there, tell him anything, you know how Sanju is. And he's saying, Vicky, Sindhi Kadi khane ka hai mere ko yaar. I said, okay. I said, I don't know how to make. I mean, I've never made a
Yeah,
Sindhi Kadi,
right.
you know. I was always a Western cook. I called my mom by satellite phone.
For the recipe.
It's like $10 a minute. I said, Mom, very quickly.
Give me the
Sindhi
recipe.
Kadi, quick. She said, okay, I'm going to write it down. I said, okay, I'm going to call you back because $10 in those days a minute is
A
like...
lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So I got the recipe and that was the first time
You made Sindhi curry.
I made Sindhi Kadi and it was like exactly like Mom's. It gave me another boost of like, wow, I made a Sindhi Kadi today, man. It's like...
And they loved it.
They love course. They said, my God, we can't believe we are in the thing. I said, yeah, well.
But in all of your travels, what was the cuisine that really resonated with you? Italy, of course, you must have seen the most amazing produce. And your senses must have exploded,
See,
I'm sure.
This whole thing on the ship and the long hours and staying away from the family and everything else was supported by love, passion, curiosity of new produce, new
Right.
techniques, knowledge. It was all work. I had nothing else to think of. And the thing is that every time I came back and I spoke to my friends and colleagues, some of my colleagues who passed out with me and they're working in reputed 5-star hotels and management trainees and chef trainees, they had great jobs. But their personalities never changed. They were
Right.
still the same. They didn't know what was going on the other side. So I used to come back and it was like a whiff of fresh air to them that I'm working on a lower level in terms of position. But the kind of knowledge which I was getting back.
Right, because you're traveling the world and experiencing different cultures.
So every
and-
time I came back, I could sit with any chef or anyone in the world and talk about anything
Right.
because I had been there. So Italy was very close to my heart because the Italian food in college made me decide to become a chef, by the way.
Okay.
That was the eureka moment. As we call it.
Right.
I still remember I bought a hand-cranked pasta machine and my nani used to do the samosa ka pattis and all that on my pasta machine. Italy was some great produce. And even South America and the Caribbean, that's where you see that 15 kinds of tropical fruits and vegetables in the local market. And it's amazing to see that all the restaurants and eateries have those produce in different forms.
Right.
It's so farm to table or market to plate, as we chefs call it. And also another place which blew my mind on produce was Thailand and Australia.
When I go to
Unbelievable.
Thailand, I only eat vegetarian food, strangely.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen and experienced that kind of freshness.
Yes.
And the variety of vegetables.
Yeah. And also the way they cook it also.
That is true.
It's got that own funk.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of spice if you want.
Yeah.
And the freshness of produce is great. And Australia too.
That's
You
true.
know, it's
Italy has just officially banned the
Lab
usage
meat.
of lab
Yeah, I
meat.
know,
What are your
100%.
thoughts on that?
I would do the same. First of all, I'm not a huge red meat consumer.
Right.
I understand about the carbon footprint and all that. But at the end of the day, the choice is yours. I would rather eat vegetables which are grown in season
Yeah.
rather than eat lab meat.
Yeah.
Like when there's no meat on the table, I don't miss it.
But what is the most underrated cuisine according to you?
Now Peruvian food is really huge. Okay.
Earlier, nobody knew it.
Yeah, but I think definitely what food needs to get more exposure in this world is regional Indian food and the micro cuisines of India.
Correct.
Bori, Sindhi,
Right.
Kachi.
Right. But India is fascinating, isn't it? In terms of how the cuisine, the language changes as you traverse. The
Every
length and
50
breadth of-
meters.
Absolutely.
Every 50 meters.
Our diversity is our strength. We're a continent. It's a miracle that
No, it
we
is.
function as a nation in that
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
But we don't celebrate it enough. We know so little about our own food. If you look at South India, for example.
I was just going to say South India for me is a continent of cuisine.
Absolutely.
In Kerala, you have 3 styles.
True.
In Tamil
Andhra
Nadu,
Pradesh is different. Tamil Nadu is different. Karnataka is different.
Yeah. Almost like 15, 16 communities of cooking. The cooking of Madura is very different from the cooking of Chettinad
Absolutely.
versus the cooking of Hyderabad. Even in Kerala, you have the Mopla,
Yeah.
which is the Muslims, then you have the Syrian Catholic, and then you have the Malayali food.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating, man.
What is the simplest meal that you possibly had within India and the tastiest meal that you would repeat over and over again?
For me, the most simplest and the most delicious thing is curd rice.
Curd rice, yes. Which they eat at the end of their meal to
Yeah,
cool their stomachs
yeah,
down
yeah.
because of all the spices that they imbibe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it is comfort food,
It's
I
a,
agree.
it's a digestive, and I think it's really tasty, man.
Yeah, with
And-
the tadka on top.
Yeah, and the best part is like you can eat it at room temperature. You can eat it absolutely chilled.
True.
And I like it warm as well sometimes. I can say dal chawal, but still dal you'll have a lot of elements.
Yeah.
It's curd
Rice.
tempering and rice, and also the gunpowder they make.
Yes.
With rice as well.
Yes.
Or with ghee and rice. So those explosive podis, PODI, which is sustainability, being frugal, protein because of the dal inside, and flavor bombs. You only need that powder
Yeah.
and a little bit of ghee, and there's a whole party going on in your mouth. You know?
True. Food is a celebration. Food is something that we all indulge in to feel better, to fill a hole in our soul, really. It's also a form of addiction. People abuse food and there are consequences. As a professional in this line, how do you navigate that?
I think your habits of eating are like a phase in your life. It depends on the era you're born in. Like when we were born, kids had to eat.
Yeah.
And you had to eat and overeat.
Yeah.
And some people didn't even do a sport.
Yeah. But we were still very active.
Yeah.
Now we're not.
Because of the screens
Yeah,
and the telephones and mobile apps and everything.
True.
I think eating is a choice.
Yeah.
You want to eat, you eat, otherwise you don't.
Correct.
But don't be a martyr.
Yeah.
I think it's human psychology that when you are not allowed to do something,
You want to do it more.
you want to do it even more. A change of lifestyle does help in your eating methods.
Especially as you grow older.
Also, now when I'm looking at it from my side of the line, I cook different what I used to cook 20 years ago. I automatically, conscientiously believe that you don't need lot of oil, butter, cream, cheese and other dairies to make food tastier.
Correct.
It's not like the good old days that, oh, it has to be rich.
Right.
No, I think playing with herbs and spices in harmony, using a moderate amount of fat, using the right kind of fat, and eating the right things at the right time can change lives. I feel morally responsible for the people who I'm feeding.
Correct.
Or what I'm even showing on my YouTube channel or whatever.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, my social and conscious responsibility also extends to the fact that I'm not just cooking tasty, delicious food, but I'm actually curing people through their food as well. Food as medicine.
Lovely.
You know,
Lovely.
that's what it is. Like, I will not recommend something which has to be loaded in fat.
Yeah.
When I did Vicky Goes Veg, my show, I actually turned vegetarian when I was writing the show.
Right.
And I was also vegetarian when I was filming for the show. You know, it's not method acting, Pooja, but it was, you know.
It just came naturally.
Yeah. That, you know, I couldn't talk about, wow, this broccoli, and go back and chomp a chicken wing. No, I wouldn't do that. So I think going out of one's comfort zone can take you wherever you want.
That is true. But you spoke about mobile apps and the obsession with screens. Today, everybody is a reviewer. I don't think food has been photographed as much as it is
Food
today.
porn. Food porn.
Food porn, exactly.
Yeah.
Earlier, there was no concept of taking a photo of your plate and then digging into it. Everybody knows better. Everybody has a suggestion. How it looks is as important as how it tastes, perhaps more so. And does that become a problem for you sometimes?
it is sometimes very discouraging that you've brought food to the table, you serve them, and people are taking pictures, and then say, "Oh, we want a picture with you, chef." I said, "Please eat the
First,
food
eat,
first."
it's going to get cold.
I said, "Please don't take photos now, or take a quick one,
yeah,
but please start eating because." The temperature of the food.
absolutely.
So you have to combat this. It's become a way of life now. At least 9 out of 10 people take photos. They want to talk about it. They want to post it on Instagram and other stuff. But then it has its own demerits. Paid reviews, non-paid reviews, rivalries reviews. I used to get very agitated and hyperactive about that. But then you realize that what really matters to you are the people who are in your restaurant,
right,
that you feed them well, take the best care from you, and the team who works with you.
correct.
The rest, they can take a walk. So my focus is on my guests who are there. And I think if you look after your guests really well,
Yeah,
the word of mouth spreads and it has a knock-on effect.
correct.
So I believe in that.
Team building must be difficult, getting people, grooming them, teaching them, and then them getting poached from you by a rival for like a few thousand rupees or perhaps even less.
Yeah.
How does one deal with that?
This has been going on with me since 2009 when I came back to India. So you can't stop poaching. See, at the end of the day, while someone is with you, you take full onus of it, full responsibility. Now, a lot of people do stay, but then it's a personal thing,
Yeah.
That chalo maine seekh liya, now let's move on.
Right.
Let's figure it out. That's a part of the industry. I rather appreciate my chefs telling me that they want to go, or a lot of the chefs come to me and listen, I'm getting a better opportunity. So I want to say, okay, what is that better opportunity?
Yeah.
It's not that I want to hold him back. I want to make sure that what he feels is actually beneficial or not beneficial for him.
Yeah.
Thinking without any bias. So I feel that if he has a better opportunity and he is inclined, I let him go.
Yeah.
But it is a part of life. People are waiting outside restaurants, behind restaurants, trying to get in touch with your staff, trying to poach them, paying them a little extra. I see that every day.
So it's a jungle out there,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. It's a big jungle.
In our industry, in the film industry, earlier people knew that they had to put in the hours, put in the years to garner that experience. You spoke about how you worked your way up, made great personal sacrifices, but you reveled in that, and that's why you're sitting here having done all the things that you've done. Do you find a lot of people, like you said, you've taught them a little and they feel that they're ready to now run a restaurant?
Yeah, all the time. In fact, when you're talking about teams and building teams, well, the players are not the same. The generation is different. They graduate from school. They think in 2 years they want to become sous chef. Then 6 months later they want to become head chef.
Right.
People are banking on current trends, but the basics are still not done well. A major problem is that people are trying to fly before they start walking.
Correct.
So this generation thing that is like that, but I'm not saying that everyone is like this. One thing about this generation is that they're all very ambitious.
Right.
They are achievers. A lot of them are great, very creative and all. But I always tell them that there is a method to the madness.
Absolutely.
And the same thing about fusion.
Yeah.
I said fusion can be confusion. If you haven't mastered what you want to fuse, how are you going to understand sensibilities?
Absolutely. But what makes for a great restaurant? Of course, the food, but the service, like you said, how you treat your customers.
I'll tell you, the restaurant starts with the greeting and welcoming of the guests, seating them down, the ambience, the mood board which you build for them. You have to get them into a groove to make them feel not at home, but very comfortable that, you are here. I have taken your responsibility to make sure that you have 100% satisfaction before you leave. That's why you need a good team to run a restaurant, because actually it's like a
well-oiled machine in that sense.
Absolutely. There is a function for everyone to happen.
Yeah.
And without all these things, the machinery doesn't work as well as you want it or perform in 100%
Right.
optimization.
But people would overlook bad service if the food was sensational.
I can give you the best food in the world, but if it's not served on time or served in a proper way,
You're not coming back.
you lose the essence. Like I can make the best food, but if something which has to be piping hot
Yeah.
somehow arrives at that table where it's tepid or lukewarm,
That's gone. Yeah. We spoke about your journey of sobriety, and you mentioned that it's really impacted your output with regards to how you're dealing with your staff, your team, and what it's doing for you internally, hence externally. Difficult, no? To walk the sober path when you are in a business which is all about pairings and tastings and food and
yeah.
beverages go hand in hand. How do you navigate that?
See, I'll tell you, I'm not a drinker anymore.
And what made you decide?
I had put on too much weight. My mind was slowing down a bit. There was a lot of socializing, there was a lot of travel, there was a lot of work and all that. But then I wasn't feeling good that morning, as in I had never felt that way.
Right.
And I just started introspecting. And that whole day I was just thinking, why am I feeling like this? And I knew exactly why I'm feeling like this. And I said, you know what? Let's detox. It lasted a week. It lasted 2 weeks. It became a month. And I started losing weight. My mind was like quicker.
Yeah.
There was a different radiance. It's not that I used to drink every day. Not even close to an alcoholic or
No,
whatever.
absolutely. But you don't have to hit rock bottom to realize.
No, but the thing is that because I was always conscious about my work,
Yeah.
but at the same time, eating and drinking was like one thing. After a while, it just became for granted that, okay, we reached the airport, come on, where's the beer?
Correct.
Or, oh man, come on, I need a drink.
Yeah.
You actually never need a drink.
That's true.
You've chosen to tell yourself that you need a drink.
Yeah, to unwind or to take off the
Yeah.
edge or whatever.
And so now for me, drinking is strictly professional reasons. If I'm going to a really good bar, or if there's a nice mixologist in town, or there's a really good bottle of wine or some different kind of spirit, something which I haven't tasted before,
Right.
I'll have a couple of sips.
Wonderful. But you're blessed if you can have a couple of sips and stop. You're blessed.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I
That's
do.
wonderful. But it has made a difference. You were
No,
saying to
no,
how
it
you...
has made it. Also, what happens is because of that, I'm much more fitter. I've lost weight, so the lethargy goes, which means your mind works faster. You don't panic eat.
Yeah.
You know, you are conscious of what you're eating.
Correct.
You are much more patient with yourself, with the people around you. You are more caring, I would say. Things which you just walked by.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
you see something beautiful, but it doesn't strike to you because your priorities are different.
Correct.
So I think in this whole sobriety kind of thing, you see all the good things which you've missed, which you have taken for granted.
You see them again with
They
new
start
eyes.
blooming in front of you.
Absolutely.
Wow, how come I didn't see this?
Yeah.
And that whole thing started amortizing. It started building up. And now it's been like 20 months.
That's amazing. But that's the only way to do it. Is just that's what they say, one day at a time, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about a week becoming a month
Yeah.
and now it's 20 months.
Yeah. I was having the same conversation with someone yesterday. They said, how come you did it? I said, anyone can do it. It's
Yeah.
just the first question and answer to yourself would be, do I really want to give it up?
Absolutely.
And if you really want to give it up, I'm trying to think logically. If you want to give up, what's stopping you?
Just yourself.
That's it, man.
Yeah, I agree. But you're one of the few people, Vicky, who's realized very early on that eventually you are in the entertainment business. Food is entertainment.
Yeah.
And you seamlessly went from being a chef, running a restaurant, many restaurants you've set up. You did your cookbook, you had your own show, and you just took to it like a duck to water.
Even when I was in school, I was always a part of the elocution and plays, and now which was forgotten. But now then when I went on the ship, we had to do cooking demos in the
Right.
Royal Theatre. And that's when my chefs were saying, how come you... So I don't know what stage fright was.
You had a showman in you that emerged.
It just was there. And also the second thing is that when you know your subject very well,
Yeah,
I never really had to try hard to do this.
right.
It was just there, like an embedded muscle memory which came out.
No, that's amazing because you're quite the showman, I must say. And is there going to be an Omni in Maharashtra, in Mumbai?
See, I'll tell you another big thing which also happened to me is that a couple of years before, when my mom was very unwell, and this was much before COVID also, I started writing down her recipes with her. And she told me that you're going to cook Western food all your life. I'm gone. My recipes are with you. Have you ever thought of doing a Sindhi restaurant? And I said, no, I mean, but you know, I think about 2 years now that I've started working on a project. And I want to cook Sindhi food all my life now. I want to take the food of my community global. That is my end game, I think.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's
because I
my
just
idea.
love Sindhi food. But we don't have a restaurant that really celebrates Sindhi food in that sense. I mean, there are a couple of eateries where you can order out, but nothing.
No, so there's been no creative, chef-driven spin on Sindhi food.
Yeah, and I remember when I visited Sindh and we went to this fishing village outside Karachi.
I want to go there so badly.
Oh my
man.
God, you will just love the food. And there was a dawat given to us where we had seafood made in the Sindhi style, Baluchistan style, and Gujarat style.
Yeah.
I will never forget that
Yeah.
meal for as long as I live.
Yeah.
And I also realized something very important when I went there. I mean, see, when you go to North India, for example, people just eat better. So when you're in Karachi or you're in Lahore, like when you're in Amritsar, street food is delicious.
It's fresh. There was this very interesting interview I had when I was doing an event in, I think, Bhopal or in Indore. And it was a street food festival, actually. And they said, so you go to the best restaurants and Michelin and this and that. What is your opinion on street food? I said, I follow one thing. When you have a street food cart, if that is crowded and people are waiting, I'll join that queue without even knowing what he's serving there.
Yeah.
I said, you don't realize, but the shelf life of sourcing production to consumption is less than 10 hours. That means the food is so fresh.
It's fresh.
There's no refrigeration. There's no recycling. Everything comes fresh. There's no infra. So whatever he has to buy, he has to use and he has to produce and he has to sell.
Correct.
And it doesn't get fresher than that.
That is true.
So that's what I say. Go to a street vendor who's always busy, he'll always have the best food.
I've heard this a lot with people who are in hospitality and chefs who put out the fanciest meals for people. But when they come home or they go out after they've wrapped, they want to eat a meal that's perhaps looked upon as, oh, so simple.
Yeah. When I go to people's houses, they say, oh God, what do I feed you? I said, see what? When you cook fancy, you eat simple.
True.
So I am totally a believer of that. I will give you truffles and caviar, but I'm going to eat my rajma chawal.
Or your curd rice.
Or my curd rice, or my Sindhi kadhi rice, or my biryani.
Yeah.
When you don't have to think too much and analyze things, because whenever I'm eating food, wherever, it's normal. I smell my food first and then I'm just kind of deconstructing it. So when you want to eat something which you've eaten before and you're familiar and you just want to eat, you want something very simple where you don't have to say, oh, how is this made? Ye kya hai? So yeah, I eat very simple.
And if you had to have a meal with 5 people, could be alive or deceased, who are those 5 people you would choose to have this magical meal with? And why?
I would like to eat again with my mom and dad who are not here.
Yeah.
So that they know.
Where you've reached.
Yeah, it's taken me a lot of heartache to
Get where you have.
Yeah, and this profession as well, you know, that we got real big slack for not joining our dad and, you know, it wasn't the best thing, but it's okay. He got to know that after a while. So definitely I would like to eat with my
Parents.
mom and dad. And then, actually, you know who? I would like to eat my meal with my mom her mom, and 4 other sisters who were mavericks in cooking. And now when I have to go back into my memories, and if I look at a food journey, what was my growing up like? What did I do? I still remember summers in Gujarat in my sister's house. They used to make their own papads and sun-drying vegetables and those kacharis
Right.
and papads. So there was so much that I've seen and eaten. And then I realized that, you know what? All these were these untouched
Yeah.
memories,
Yeah.
thoughts.
All
which-
like buried in you.
yeah, and then suddenly when I have to talk about it, when I talk about Gujarat, all comes out. So I think it's all connected.
Yeah.
But definitely with all my masis, I used to call them.
And
my
your grandmother
mom's
who used your
masis.
pasta machine to cut
Yeah,
the famous samosas.
100%.
That was an amazing detail.
Yeah, because one sister was good with sweets, one was with savory. Each one had their speciality. And I owe big time to them for all the food which they fed me.
So we begin the new year and everyone's got these new year resolutions. And number one is always, I'm going to get fitter this year. I'm going to eat healthy this year. So just a few common tips for people to not deprive themselves. Like you said, don't be a martyr.
Yeah.
But just make a few changes.
I don't want to push people on their diets, but definitely no bad sugar, no bad fat.
Right.
And secondly, the best thing, like how the Japanese believe, eat only 80% of your appetite every time.
Right.
Leave space for your body.
So we don't need that second helping or
We
the
don't
third.
know. When you feel you're just about getting satisfied,
Stop.
stop. That's
But
it.
tough in North India, na, with the North Indian aggressive hospitality where they will feed you until you're groaning
Yeah.
and lying in a heap somewhere.
But I think that's everywhere. But also it's a thing of the past now. At the end of the day, you've got pickles being made in olive oil now. You've got multi-grain and gluten-free attas for parathas.
That is true.
See, the love of food will never ever diminish from the face of India or on the earth. I think people are making a conscious move towards eating or believe that they are eating healthy, which is a good thing as well. And I think accessibility to knowledge about food
Yeah.
is also there. Like, I don't need to really go and see a nutritionist or a specialist to find out what do I have to eat, what I can't eat. But definitely avoid fried food, eat more vegetables. I think we call it the protein flip. So let vegetables be the center stage of your meal with little portions of meat on the side.
Ah, that's interesting.
It's called protein flip. So if I'm eating a steak with mushrooms, no, eat mushrooms with a little steak on the side.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. It takes down the calories as well.
How do you pack so much in, Vicky? You have your YouTube channel, you've got cookbooks, you have restaurants, you're traveling. How do you pack so much in and thrive in it?
I've always been a multitasker. I'm just so good at time management and delegation.
Right.
Now, the whole punctuality thing started with me on the ship.
Yeah. That must have been
Because
solid training.
you can't be 2 minutes late at work.
Right.
Because everything is on timing.
Yes.
Everything is so programmed because at this time the dining room opens, this time guests come in, this is the time they have to leave because all of them are going for an excursion.
Yeah.
When the ship reaches New York or Southampton, you've got 7 hours to turn the whole ship around, get ready for embarkation. So the punctuality and discipline came to me from the ship. For me, I can't be late. I'm always on time. Even when I'm taking flights, I do 7-8 flights a month. I'm always early at the airport because I don't like to get paranoid. At the end of the day, you gotta go, man. So
True.
I am very anal about timekeeping, even in my kitchen. And I remember once it happened to me that I was on a beach in the Caribbean, in Grand Cayman.
Okay.
I fell asleep. I got to the dock and the ship was already there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so once you miss the bus, you miss the bus.
And then.
No. So luckily, we were not very far away. So the ship agent says, oh, there's a crew member
Still
Who's
loitering
there?
on the beach.
They said yes, because you have a card, no? They scan your card. So they very well knew, but they had sailed off. So luckily, they were not very far away. So they sent a lifeboat to pick me up. But I got slag from the captain and I could have been fired. Because once you miss the ship, you're fired.
There's no second chance.
No, there's forget about it. Now, because of my repetition, and I was still a cook, but I was very good at what I did. So that's when I realized that no matter who you are, what you do, if you're late, you're late. You
Yeah.
miss the bus, you miss the bus.
What is the one advice you would give diners with regards to how they should pause to just possibly thank their server, thank the chef? Like, you'll never forget the experience with Mandela.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell the diner who's so immersed in their phone now?
I like to tell the diners, even someone who I'm feeding even normally, if there is anything wrong with your food or you don't like it, be the first person to voice that. Never ever lie to the chef or try to make him happy that, wow, it's amazing, it's this. It's actually not, or they are not telling the truth,
Right.
because it triggers off a whole new circle of wrong info, motivation, morale. Because if someone is really appreciating your food, you don't want to change things.
Right. So then,
Then, wow, okay, fine,
so then that mistake gets reinstated and becomes the norm then.
Yeah.
So you want constructive criticism.
Yeah, I only believe in that because I think praises are short-lived.
Right.
I advise the diners to eat seasonal food. I advise diners to be a little more patient when the food is coming out. I want them to eat on the table straight away and be honest about the food and the service.
That's important, but very interesting what you're saying is that don't kill me with fake praise.
Yeah.
But tell me, in your 20s, did you imagine that you would be where you are right now?
I had no clue that when I came back to Mumbai, after I left my ship, I was a superstar on the ship, executive chef. When I came back here, I had to start again when I joined Oris. I had no clue. I had a standby plan B that, agar yahan nahi chalega, I'm going to bounce back to the ship. I love the ships. I only came back for my wife and my daughter Tanisha was like 3 at that time. And my parents were not like keeping too well. I only came back for them, not because I've already spent 14 years, I've reached the pinnacle. I mean, it would be silly for anyone to leave.
Yeah.
The money was damn good. You were paid for 12 months. You worked for 8 months. Everything's taken care of. It was a beautiful life. Of course, there was a lot of pressure, but very secure. Unless the ship sunk. But it was very, very secure. So I only came back for my family. I didn't come back reluctantly. I came back because I had to come back.
Yeah.
But I always had a plan B that I would go back. But things started changing here. The shows started, NDTV happened. And I think also at the same time, there was this whole gap. There was no cool chef.
Right.
They used to call me Jamie Oliver of India. Because my style was different. When I got slag from the channel that who's going to use broccoli? What is artichoke? Olives kaun khayega? So I actually
Introduce
educated people about ingredients and which people still tell me.
Wow.
Nobody knew what arborio rice was. It was a disruption. And that's the reason why NDTV took such a big step that, we want a really, really cool vegetarian show from you, which is non-Indian.
Yes.
And not very Asian. So that's when my whole trip around the world, working with different vegetables, how do they cook vegetables in West Indies, how do they cook vegetables in Asia, how do the Mexicans cook vegetables, because I had been there.
So you applied the techniques.
Yeah, for me it was like, chalo, let's open this chapter, and everything was almost like how you said, it's recycled and reused. So the entire knowledge, travel was churning into experiences, into menus, into television shows, into conversations,
Wonderful.
everything, yeah.
This French lawyer famously said that, tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah.
So
You
does
are what
that-
you eat.
You are what you eat.
Absolutely.
So does that hold true? Because you can gauge somebody's persona and personality at once with what they order.
Correct. If someone who's absolutely fit, you know that you can offer that person a salad.
Right.
Also, to start a meal, you can tell. Yeah. I mean, you are what you eat. If you eat too much food which is high in calories and you don't have a fitness regime,
Yeah.
you become like that. Also, working on the ship, and there were so many different kinds of guests, we always knew that the English people are going to eat more well done meat. American guests, they're going to eat more medium rare, medium.
Yeah.
When they used to say Japanese portion, it means half a portion. So now, many years later, when I went to Japan and Japanese restaurants, they get offended if you serve them too much food on the plate because they don't like to waste even one grain of rice
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
So when they say Japanese portion, it means also after a while it became a joke that when people were not eating enough, so they say about, are you eating Japanese portions or not? Or are you going to feed me a Japanese portion? If you want to ever go and find out what kind of people live in a city, go to their local market. It tells a lot about them.
So we started with food as memory, nostalgia, sense of identity. And I want to ask you about food as legacy. Is your daughter inclined towards following in your footsteps? Would you like her to?
I would love her to join, and she's an amazing cook. I wish someone would, but at the same time, it's all good. My books are there,
Right.
my YouTube channel's there. So, in terms of direct legacy, I want to go to Sindh. I want to go where it's a small
Ancestors.
village.
What's the name
It's
of
called
the-
Sevan. Sevan is where Maskalandar was there, and also where the highest concentration of Sufi temples and music is, by the way.
Beautiful.
My parents, they were very, very young when the families came across. So I don't have anyone to really ask what was it like there.
Right.
I really want to go into Sindh and find out that the people who didn't come across, what are they eating? What has
Right.
changed in their lives? Being in Karachi and Pakistan, there is also an Islamization of the cuisine. But they're still Sindhis.
True.
They stayed back. It's not that they're bad people. So I want to do a really microscopic study of, like in Sindh, since I want to do this project, I'm going a little deep. Now, the southernmost tip of Sindh is called Tharparkar. Then you have the desert, and then you have Rajasthan and
Correct.
Gujarat. If you see the similarities,
Yes.
like the Sindhi kadhi ka besan and drying vegetables and kachori and all that is all in Rajasthan also.
Yes.
So there is this very interesting connects which I want to bring through a restaurant.
But that will be fascinating. What are the other elements of Sindhi food that you'd like to bring into the forefront?
Well, Sindhis cooked a lot with river fish because there was the Indus River. And a lot of the Sindhi food it's immigrant food.
Yes.
Okay. Nose to tail cooking, liver, kidneys, offals,
Yes.
river fish,
Wow.
root vegetables,
Wow.
seasonal cooking with the drumstick flowers, moringa flowers. In fact, I'm still learning. There's a lot of food which is eaten during festivities. So I want to go deeper into it from a Sindhi chef point of view. We filmed in Ulhasnagar, where I went after like 45 years, to the top 5-6 most iconic eateries, and I've shot it for my YouTube channel. And it was an amazing evening with them. It was before Diwali. These are the places which we had heard of, but I'd never been there. So I met the owners, I spoke to them as well. It's sad that the next generation does not want to take this job.
Oh.
They don't want to be street food vendors. They want to start something else. So it is a common dilemma among the current people who are serving traditional Sindhi food, who have shops and small restaurants in Chembur and Ulhasnagar as well, that the next generation does not want to take it forward.
So you are planning on taking that legacy forward. So more power to you.
Thank you.
Because eventually food is memory, food is nostalgia, food is legacy.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Vicky
Thank you,
Ratnani. It
Pooja.
was a joy
Thank
and
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you guys. Happy New Year to all. Eat well and stay safe.
Yes. The Pooja Bhatt Show is produced by Mammoth Media Asia and Epilogue Entertainment and distributed by iHeart Podcasts. The executive producer is Jonathan Strickland.